we'll get started. So verse 41. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover, and when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind. His parents did not know it, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey, but they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. Dear God, I pray that we all have a great Sunday today. After church, fellowshipping, always fun time in the living room. And I pray that you would be able to speak through me and just be able to give a clear message and good understanding. So, amen.
Amen.
All right. So the beginning of this, it says, now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the Feast of the Passover. So the Passover was really significant. It was a time when crowds of thousands of people would come there. And I was talking about it more with Cameron this morning. They would be putting blood, if you're a believer, over the doorway of your house. It was really significant. And all these thousands of people, huge crowds of people would be coming here. So it was just a lot of people. And at the time, if you keep reading, at verse 42, and when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And I have that underlined, 12 years old. I think a lot of the times we kind of just forget about the fact that Jesus did have a childhood, and there was a period when he was a kid. There was a time when he was 5. There was a time when he was 20. When he started his real ministry in the next chapter over in Luke chapter 3, he was about 30 years old. So there's this long gap where you don't really see a lot of growth, really. And I think, for me at least, reading this, it really made me think about how there really was a period where Jesus had a life and he was growing up and he did things that we did. He would have fun. And like you guys, you can think of it, he was 12 years old. So he was young junior high or 7th grader's age. So think of Jesus your age almost, just about. So I'm going to continue. So when you're 12 years old, in that time, you take up your father's trade. So for that, for Jesus, that would be carpentry. So imagine at 12 years old, you're going to start learning carpentry or whatever the trade was at the time. And that's just significant because they're young and they're starting to learn. And you'll see why that's significant later on. If you guys don't know, I'm in the trades. Just started about half a year ago. I do construction, plumbing. So all the houses in mostly Montecito, we do a lot of brand new work there. And I'll just share a story because a lot of craziness happens. I work with some construction people are crazy. Just to be clear, like it's something else. So there was a time you make a lot of mistakes too when you're first learning, and plumbing, a lot of things can go wrong. So there was a time, usually, like I said, we do brand new homes, but there was this really bad service call that me and my 2 coworkers had. There's a boss guy, he's kind of mean to me, but I like him. And then another coworker. But he's my boss, so I get yelled at every once in a while. But we went to this house, we were underneath there, and we were redoing the entire waste, so all the sewage and everything for this guy. It was really bad. And we went in there, and it was early in the morning. We started, we're there at 7 in the morning, we're crawling in under this house. Great time. And he's like, yeah, so we need to clear everything out and then we'll put everything new in. And he says, okay, start with that one, just cut that, he just gave me, he was doing something. He's like, go cut that pipe, we need that out of there. I was like, all right. So I grabbed the Sawzall, started just cutting through it, just ripped through it. It happens immediately. And he thought that it was an old pipe, but no, it was a water line. The water was on still. So I'm not kidding, not even 8 o'clock in the morning, we were under house and water's just spraying everywhere. And he went to the truck and he just told me to cut this. And I'm yelling at him, and he came back and turned the water off, and yeah, it was 7:30 in the morning. I was soaking wet, and that was a good time. We continued the rest of the day, but it was fine. But anyways, so you start learning the trade when you're 12. So a lot of the time, just things involving your hands. And like I said, that's important. We'll see that later on. So I'm going to keep reading. In verse 43, and then the feast was ended, and as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know him. So this next part is significant. Jesus chooses to stay behind there in Jerusalem. That's his choice. That wasn't an accident. So he stays there. At 12 years old, keep that in mind. You're 7th grader, same age. And then Mary and Joseph went a day. So I'm going to read the next verse. But supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey, but then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. So, reading this commentary, your parents aren't going to leave you somewhere, right? They're going to make sure you're with them, but in this time, it could be a little more acceptable because there's thousands of people. And the way I looked at it, Jesus was going along with them, and their parents saw he's probably with some of the other younger boys that he knows, and he'll find us later on in the night. So that's one day. So that first night, they don't find him, and they're like, where the heck is Jesus? I wouldn't want to leave Jesus somewhere, personally. It doesn't seem like the best thing, but keep in mind, it was his decision. He stayed there. So then the next verse, after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And continuing on, so they looked for him for one night, right? That's one day. Then they went back. That's another day, whole another day journey. And then they looked for him for 3 days. So think of yourselves as junior hires going 5 days without your parents in some city that just you alone. Like, wouldn't that scare you? I'd be scared. I'd probably cry. If you guys know me, I get lost really easily. It's kind of insane. But I get lost all the time, like in a grocery store. I hate it. I still get lost. I'd probably still get lost in a grocery store. But imagine just actually think about going 5 days without your parents and your parents not knowing where you are. So that was a pretty big deal for both Jesus and his parents. But his parents, as you'll see, they were worried. So verse 47, and all who heard him were amazed and understanding at his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress. So there's a few words in there that are important to me. So his parents were in great distress, and I think that is important because it shows they really cared for him, and they were just really wondering, why did you do this to us? It's a question to ask. And as you can see, Jesus stayed behind. He's in the temple. And he's talking with these teachers, and to get an understanding of what this would be like and how amazed they were with him, I read some of David Guzik's commentary. If you guys don't know that, he has commentary on every chapter of the Bible. It's amazing. But I read it, and he said that this would be similar to an elementary schooler talking with a PhD in rocket physics. So imagine yourself, again, 12 years old, talking with someone who has a doctorate degree in rocket physics. They went to Stanford for 4 years or whatever, and you're having a conversation with them of understanding, asking them questions, and them asking you questions and amazing them with your answers. So that shows the importance of, even at a young age, Jesus, how important that was and how smart and knowledgeable he was already beginning to become, even though he was only 12. And it says, Jesus listened and asked questions, and they were amazed. And they emphasized as the teachers themselves were very amazed at what he was saying. And then, continuing on in verse 48, and when his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress. And again, just touching on that, they were really worried, and they finally found him after 5 days of working for him, or looking for him. And then the next part is what is important. So after reading through this too, I think it was really fun to do this too, because when I first read this section, when Cameron first asked me to do this, I read it and I was like, how the heck am I going to talk on this? This is just another section of the Bible. And I think I'm sure a lot of you guys haven't done that, but when you start to actually read it and research it, there's so much more to it than just that section. So, anywhere in the Bible, you just read those parts and you can glaze over them, but then once you actually start to get into it, I finally started to feel more comfortable that I could actually talk for a few minutes on just a few verses of one chapter. So why have you treated us so, is what Mary asked him. And after researching it, some people believe that it was not good of Jesus to stay behind without telling his parents. I'm sure if you guys stayed, you were out somewhere, you were out downtown, and you just went somewhere and stayed there and didn't tell your parents, they'd look for you. But you'd probably be in trouble, right? But instead of being in trouble, Mary asked him, why have you treated us so? She's just asking a question and looking for an answer. So that was not sin of Jesus to stay just based on what she asked. So then verse 49, this is the important part. I want you guys to be listening here. In verse 49, and he said to them, why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house? You guys get that? I'm going to read it again. And he said to them, why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house? So this is really significant. This is a significant part of this section. So he's 12 years old, and his mom asks him, why did you stay here? And he says, why did you look for me for 3 days? You didn't just assume that I was going to be in my Father's house? He's like, it's almost like, it's almost sassy to me. Like, he says, like, really? You looked for me for 5 days and you didn't know I'd be here. So the next verse, and they did not, verse 50 just says, and they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them. So after he says this, he's kind of like, they didn't understand. They're just kind of like, what do you mean? Like, they're confused almost. Like, why did you just assume that I would be here? So there's a lot of significance to that. So Jesus stays behind, specifically, doesn't tell his parents, stays there for 5 days. He's in the temple, and he's talking with these teachers, and he's learning. And that's a significant part of this section. So then, verse 51, and he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. So another part after researching this and reading it and studying and reading different people's commentaries, some people believe, which is wrong, that it was almost sinful of Jesus that he stayed behind. Like I said, if you guys stay behind, you'd probably be in trouble. Your parents probably want to just say, why have you treated us so? And then be okay with it. You'd probably be in trouble. But in this chapter, the word submissive there is really important. So verse 51, and he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. So after he stays, his parents ask him, like, okay, now we actually need to go. Like, we're going back. And he says, okay. And I think that's also important. It ties into one of the Ten Commandments, and you need to honor your father and mother, whether you like it or not. That's just what you need to do. I'm sure that Jesus wanted to stay in the temple another 5 days, how long, and continuing to learn and continuing to talk to these people. But he was submissive. And that's why I don't really get when people think that that's an issue, because that part is right there that it says he was submissive to them, showing that he was obeying his parents and he was listening to them, even though he seemed a little sassy. Like I said, that verse really stuck out to me. Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house? And then, let's see. And then the last verse, 52. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. And so this last verse kind of ties everything together. It shows he stayed in the temple and he was talking with these people, and he continued to learn. And it says, in stature and in favor with God and man. And continuing, he was 12 years old. Like I said, there's that section where you don't really see Jesus growing up, and you can almost kind of forget that he was a real human, and he lived, like I said, had lives just like you guys, but he still increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. And this section of time where you don't really see much of, other than first he's born, and then he's 12 years old, and then just one chapter over, he's chapter 3, verse 23. Jesus was, when he begins his ministry, was about 30 years of age, being the son and was supposed of Joseph and the son of Heli. So that shows throughout those entire years, he was continuing to learn and continuing to increase in wisdom. So there's that other about 18-year period where there's not a lot talked about it. I actually had a pretty interesting conversation this morning bringing this up. Jesus was perfect spiritually and in everything that he did. But we were talking about this morning, he was 12 years old when he was learning carpentry. And we were talking about, could he make a mistake of, cutting a piece of wood wrong, or making a mistake in that sense of, not making a mistake as a human, but not in a spiritual sense. And we just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and kind of came to the conclusion that yes, Jesus was perfect, but again, this just shows how that he was a human. He lived lives just like us, and when you're learning something, you'll make mistakes. You can't do something right every single time, even if that's not a sin. And that was absolutely not a sin to, chop a piece of wood wrong. But at 12 years old, you're learning your father's trade, and you're learning. And I want to go back one more time to verse 49. And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" And that ties into the trades. That's the significance of saying that Jesus was a carpenter. When you're 12 years old, you start learning your parents' trade. And that shows you he's in his Father's house learning the trade of his Father, God. And that, if you guys can get one thing out of this, that is an important part. That he was there, he was learning, and you could think of it as a trade that continued to be there, and at 12 years old started that and continued to learn carpentry as well. So I think that's mostly what I have, but I just want to end with one thing. Sarah, want to get ready. I just wanted to end with, are you guys spending time in your Father's house? If someone were to come up to you, would you want them to assume, would they assume that, you were spending time here, spending time in the Word? Do your friends know when you go to school? If they ask you, do they know you're a Christian? I think it's so hard if someone asks you or says something to you that just implies that they don't even know what you believe, or that you're coming to church, or that you do that. And that's something that's really important, is to be sharing these things with these people, and to know what you believe in, even if they aren't really listening. It's good to, they say they don't want to be any part of it, but to continue to let them know, and try and get them to understand a little more, and invite your friends to church too. I know, we want to get more people in here every time, but that's just my question to you guys. Are you spending time in your Father's house like Jesus was? He left his parents for 5 days without telling him, just to spend more time doing that. And you guys can't leave your parents for 5 days and go do that, but are you making those sacrifices to be able to go and do that? And that's just my question to you. People should know without a doubt that you're a Christian and what you believe in. And I mean, if you're using bad words at school and falling into these things, and people aren't going to believe that, or even if you're doing these things and you say that you are a Christian, they might not believe it. So that's just what I wanted to end on, is you spending time. So I will close, and Sarah will come up and do worship.